Hey, it's Fox from InfernoFox Gaming. As I mentioned a million times on this channel, my favorite video game series of all time is Final Fantasy. From the familiar worlds, themes, and monsters to the stellar storytelling, characters, and music, there's no doubt how much of a loved series this is for me. I've been playing since the very first entry came out on the NES in 1990 here in the States. I've also replayed a number of these entries multiple times and have gained a keen eye for a number of details for them. That being said, I got a lot of hot takes on the series that I wanted to share, and if you're fans of the Final Fantasy franchise, you might find some of these a bit spicy. And if you like RPG content, retro gaming, Nintendo, and more, make sure to like the video, click subscribe, and ring that bell for notifications. For these hot takes, I'm going to jump right in and follow the chronological order of the series. And my first hot take is that the OG Final Fantasy is a buggy mess. So obviously the game functions. It was fun to play back in the day and still is for many of us old dogs here. And it was also a marvel in the RPG genre for the time. But many of the game's functions don't work as they're intended. This includes things like weapons such as elemental swords like the flame sword doesn't inflict more damage on fire-weak monsters, spells such as temper literally not working, the function of running in battle not pulling the proper character slot, and stats like intelligence not having any function whatsoever. I'd also argue the game isn't inherently fair. I still get PTSD-like flashbacks whenever I replay the game and get to the ice cave. This is often why ports and re-releases nerf the difficulty, add a number of quality of life improvements, and just really get the game more fair. And I'd say that's a pretty critical look for the first entry. Let's jump ahead and talk about the third one. And my second hot take is that Final Fantasy III for the Famicom or NES is an underrated gem and is a very good entry for the first 95% of the game. The graphical upgrades on this entry compared to the first two are absolutely fantastic. I really appreciated how well the battles themselves flow, not only feeling speedier, but also smaller nuances like hit point damage appearing both on enemies and party members when they take damage. I also felt bringing back the job system from the first entry was really great, which not only allowed the player to change jobs whenever they wanted, but also felt like it allowed the player to keep their preferred or favorite jobs most of the time. Exceptions being the caves where the players have had to cast mini on them, as well as the Garuda boss battle. Yeah, there's a fair bit of level grinding, and the multiplying enemies on a couple of the dungeons are annoying, but I genuinely had a really fun time with this game. But as I mentioned with this hot take, the last 5% of the game is the biggest issue, for the benefit and hindrance of the player. What benefits us are the overpowered ninja and sage jobs. They're super fun classes that allow the player's characters to be all-star fighters whom can equip anything with the ninja or cast any spell with the sage. But these really make all the other classes completely obsolete for how well that they really work. And what really hinders us in the last 5% of the game is that last dungeon. Final Fantasy III does not have save spots in dungeons at all, so there's no opportunities to save in this 10+ floor dungeon. Once the player then progresses from the crystal tower dungeon to the dark world portion, which is arguably the hardest, this becomes a point of no return where the player must finish the game out knowing they can't go back for more supplies, rest in a tent to replenish magic charges, or save. The Pixel Remaster is by far the best version of this game and is worth playing for the first 95%, as well as the last 5% made a bit easier, such as when you defeat each of the 4 bosses before the Cloud of Darkness, it refills the hit points and magic points for the players, as well as the quick save ability. And my next hot take has to do with Final Fantasy IV. And if you like this entry as much as I do, make sure you check out my video where I rank the many, many ports that this entry got. Regarding one of these specific ports, the DS version needs to be remade using high-definition models and environments akin to what was done for Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core Reunion. For Crisis Core to the remaster of Reunion, it really wasn't a bridge too far between those two, but I did notice a considerable gain between the two entries while still retaining the overall gameplay integrity of the original PSP entry. That being said, I feel Square Enix would do well to give this same treatment to the fantastic DS version. Heck, we've already got the character polygonal models for Dark Knight and Paladin Cecil, Kain, as well as Golbez from Final Fantasy Dissidia. Those, of course, can be up-res and upgraded. The OG DS version was fantastic and was a great way to see familiar scenes from its 2D pixelated days while also being one of the most difficult versions. The biggest problems in my eyes with the DS is the low-res PS1 type polygonal models, and honestly, I don't think they've aged that well. By using models similar to Crisis Core Reunion, it had straddled the line quite well, looking much better while still being fairly cost-effective to develop. Now, let's admit, if you thought these hot takes were pretty weak sauce, get ready, because the last two are pretty 5-alarm in the spiciness scale. My penultimate hot take is that the quality and integrity of Final Fantasy VII soundtrack is not as good as what should be expected for the series' first foray onto CD-based media. Don't get me wrong, this is absolutely a great and iconic piece of work from the revered composer Nobuo Uematsu. But just the way it sounds, the overall quality isn't as good as what I would expect for the series' first leap onto CD media, like I said. Maybe with the exception of One Winged Angel and its respective vocals in Latin. My thought on this is that Nobu-san most likely had been used to condensing his composition from the NES and SNES days. He may not have been acquainted with the sound processor on the PS1, but maybe he was still technically developing for a Nintendo-type console like the Nintendo 64, hence compression. Or perhaps it was mostly MIDI-based sound synthesis due to limitations specific to the time of development for the PS1. It could also be a motif or theme that Nobu-san was looking to achieve with 7's soundtrack, given it that retro feel. Whatever it was, though, it's no surprise that the music quality increased with the next two entries in the series on the PS1. And that may have been due to improvements in overall sound technology and development, as well as Nobu-san gaining that experience he needed developing music for these games on this system. Now, my final hot take, and this is the absolutely spiciest of them all here, I believe that Final Fantasy 15 is a better game than Final Fantasy 10. Despite all of the hate that 15 gets for its boy band vibes and samey dressed colored heroes, both 10 and 15 have great stories with excellent exploration of both worlds, each in their own ways. Where 10 sees the player being guided down the long hallway of Yuna's pilgrimage to Zanarkand, in 15 the player is given a lot of autonomy for the first 70% of the game as they explore the world of Eos, sort of like a classic Americana road trip. Yes, the player then gets put into its long hallway after this point in 15, although with Umbra's Shiba power, the player can go back to this exploration part of the game once they near the end, as well as after beating the game. But Fox, 15 didn't have turn-based battles like 10 did. I'm going to remind you that while I am a huge turn-based RPG fan, I still enjoyed 15's battle system. But let's talk about 10's turn-based battle system, which is the specific part of the entry I have the biggest issue with, and why I think 15 is better. Don't get me wrong, it absolutely excels with the fantastic and varied boss battles 10 has. But for the rest of the random encounters, against the monster fodder the player runs into, which is 99% of the battles that we get into, it ends up being a boring game of rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock. Each random encounter has a weakness to one of the 6 main party members that is easily exploited. Further adding to this is that only party members who actively participate in battles, either by attacking or even defending, gain sphere points. This means constant rotation of characters on every battle, requiring them to gain experience, which quickly gets tedious. Tedious. Comparing this to 15's battles against enemies in the field, which are ever present, or in the dungeons, and again without interruption, where all 4 party members always get experience points, I felt that the overall flow in 15 feels more organic than 10. While I've got amazing memories of both games' stories, characters, and many environments, I also remember the tedium of all those random encounters in 10. Again, something I didn't have in 15. I will also add that I played 15 right when it came out too, which was before they made a number of updates and improvements to the game, supposedly back when the game was in its roughest shape, and I still think it was better than 10. So those were my Final Fantasy hot takes. So what are your hot takes with this fantastic RPG series? Let me know in the comments section below. Also, let me know your thoughts on my choices and just how much you were angry at my critique of 7's music quality, or your perceived feelings of blasphemy to my thoughts about 15 being better than 10. Love to start a dialogue with you all about this fantastic series. Thank you again for watching, and have a great day.